Getting it started. We're going to get rolling. So good morning, everyone. Appreciate your time on this fine Friday. On behalf of W.S. Conley, Landscape Supply, 10 Barge Seed, Walker Supply, we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Mental Health Awareness and Work-Life Balance with Lisa Goatley. My name is Eric Snellsire. I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing with Landscape Supply. Landscape Supply and our sister companies, 10 Barge and Walker, have education as a core value. And we continue to offer both in-person and virtual options throughout the course of the year to serve our customers. Additionally, you'll see us as the premier sponsor at a lot of the local trade associations that we serve, including the National GCSAA, where this past week I actually participated in National Golf Day down on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. this week. So what a great experience that was to see so many people. And before we get started here, I want to go over a couple logistics. If you hover your mouse over the screen, down at the bottom, there should be a couple functions that'll allow you guys to engage during this presentation. There's a chat function. You can use that chat function to type in any questions or comments that you may have during this presentation. Additionally, there's a raise hand function. If you use that, we'll pause. I'll interrupt Lisa during the presentation and we'll ask some questions live. I'll unmute you and give you the ability to kind of ask your question live to her or say your comment. So there's a couple ways for you guys to interact, and we do encourage that to happen throughout the course of we've got plenty of time. I know this is a big topic, Lisa, for you. Normally this is about a 2-hour or 4-hour webinar that you do with the National GCSAA at our national event there, or I think you said you did the sports turf managers as well, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for taking time today, Lisa. We're really excited to have you as part of our Learn program. And Lisa is a licensed professional counselor and certified clinic trauma professional. She runs a private practice in Blacksburg, Virginia. Lisa has a bachelor's degree from Virginia Tech in family and childhood development and a master's degree from the University of Maryland in marriage and family therapy. Lisa practices therapy with individuals experiencing depression, anxiety, stress, burnout, family conflict, life transitions, and grief. Additionally, she is the wife of Dr. Mike Goatley of Virginia Tech. And with Mike's involvement in all the associations, she has a very good handle on what we do on a day-to-day basis in our industry here in turf. So it's exciting to have you today, Lisa. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn the camera off and give you the stage. So thank you so much for your opportunity today.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. So we're going to talk a little bit today about an area of life that's a little bit different. I know as a part of the Learn series, you all have been learning some things about the technical aspect of the work that you do. Today, we're going to talk about something that's a little more personal, working on some personal growth, some information about ourselves as human beings. As Eric said, I've been a therapist. Well, maybe he didn't say that. I've been a therapist for 34 years. And I've worked in a variety of settings. I've been in community mental health a couple of times. I've worked for the Baptist hospital system. We had an inpatient unit, and I was in charge of an outpatient office when folks were discharged from the hospital. I've been in private practice a couple of times. Been an educator as a member of the adjunct faculty at Mississippi State, teaching in the psychology department for a while. But the bulk of my career, most of what I've always done is work in clinical practice, working with people experiencing issues with mental health. So I'm happy today for us to talk a little bit about mental health. One of the things I'm hoping is that the more we talk about this, the less stigma there is around mental health topics. If there's anything we can say that good that came out of the pandemic, one of those things was that we began talking about mental health more openly. You could hardly turn on a talk show or any type of public forum. People were talking about mental health increasingly, and it's still sort of an active topic that we're talking about. So, what I'm hoping is that, if anything good came out of the pandemic, it's that we're more open in talking about mental health and addressing it. So if we're going to talk about mental health, let's talk a little bit about what good mental health is. Good mental health is our psychological, emotional, and social well-being. I got to move this out of the way a little bit, sorry. And it's more than the absence of mental illness. So if we think about our physical health, good physical health, being really healthy, is more than the absence of poor health. It's actually having a wellness plan, addressing our physical health in a way that we optimize our physical health. And good mental health is the same way. It's having psychological structures and ways of thinking and interfacing with the world that come from a really healthy perspective, not just the absence of mental health. So why would we want to talk about this? Mental health issues cost the global economy $1 trillion annually. And that takes the form of lost productivity, when we're either not well enough to come to work, or when we underperform. So that's the absenteeism. Many times people aren't equipped from the mental health perspective to do their jobs. They get overwhelmed, burned out. We have staff turnover. Those of you who run businesses or manage people know that one of the biggest costs you have is in staff turnover. When we look at our, from a business perspective, it's more cost effective to retain a good employee than it is to have to advertise, hire, train, and onboard a new employee. So we want to try to keep our employees in a healthy space. We also look at the human cost, right? So it doesn't just have a monetary impact. There's also the human cost. What is the value of human life? What is the value of our well-being? It takes a toll. Mental health issues take a toll on our well-being. If we look at a little bit of a few statistics here, the National Institute of Health in 2020, which was their latest statistic, 21 million adults struggle with a depression diagnosis. That's 8.4% of the population. Actually, the most common mental health issue that people experience is anxiety. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America has a statistic out that 40 million adults struggle with anxiety. That's 19% of the population. Nearly 1/5 of people struggle with an anxiety disorder. So when we talk about depression and anxiety, we're looking at millions and millions of people, and nearly 30% of our population that struggles with mental health issues related to depression and anxiety. So it's a pretty significant health condition that we talk about here. And so we want to try to address it. And like any health condition, the earlier you address something, the more easily treatable it is, and the more likely we recover from it. Some people experience just an episodic psychosocial stressor that might create symptoms of depression and anxiety. Those folks might have full recovery, and become asymptomatic after treatment. Other people struggle with a chronic mental health condition and experience depression and anxiety on an ongoing basis. And it's something that they learn to manage throughout their lives. And we want to encourage people to manage that health condition proactively. So if we think of the parallel about our physical health again, right? So when we look at people who have perhaps one episode of a major depressive disorder or one episode of an anxiety issue, that would be the parallel. The parallel there in our physical health would be like strep throat. I get it. I have treatment and I recover from it, and I'm done. If we look at it as a chronic health condition, which it can also be, that's more like diabetes. It's a health condition that I have, and I learn to manage it. And there are things that I can do. I might need medication. I might not need medication. If you have type 1 diabetes, you probably need medication, or you will need medication. But you also need to make some adjustments in your lifestyle. If you have type 2 diabetes, you may or may not need medication, but you will need to make some adjustments in your lifestyle. So we look at mental health conditions in the same way, because if we think about it, the brain is an organ like any other organ in the body. It just happens to be one of the most complex organs in the body. So when we look at mental health conditions, we need to look at the brain just like we look at any other organ in the body, like the pancreas when it comes to diabetes. And so we need to learn to address and take care of what's happening with the organ that we happen to call the brain. So what are some of the benefits of doing this? It's when we look at trying to improve our mental health, it's not a passive process. Just like trying to improve our physical health is not a passive process. So we're going to put time and effort and energy into this. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the benefits of improving our mental health. There's a significant relationship between mental health and how we perform on our jobs, how we perform in our relationships, how we perform in our personal lives, how well we're able to live the lives that we want to live. And there's a significant relationship between having good mental health and optimal performance. When we have better mental health, we just function better. We cope with stressors better. We can manage our emotions more productively. We can face challenges with some degree of resilience. We're not as easily overwhelmed. We don't collapse under the weight of some psychosocial stressor. People who are healthy mentally and emotionally are more engaged with other people. They're more engaged with their partners. They're more engaged with their children. They're more engaged in the workplace. And in general in our communities. So there are some benefits to having better mental health for all of us, not just personally, but interpersonally and societally. So society as a whole benefits from healthier individuals. So we've set the stage for understanding what good mental health is, why we would want to put effort and energy into that. Let's talk a little bit about how we might recognize that there's a problem. I see a lot of people who have struggled for a really long time before they finally end up in my office. And some of them weren't aware that what they were experiencing was a mental health issue. And so let's talk a little bit about how we might know if we're struggling with a mental health issue and we might need to do something about that. We might see that there's a decline in our performance, either at work or at home. So it may be that everything just feels harder, or I'm less efficient, or I dread the day if I wake up dreading the day, or if I just I'm not as efficient as I used to be. I sit in front of my computer and, things that I could have knocked out in a half an hour takes me hours to do it. That may be a sign that it's time to take a look at something. Changes in your sleep or appetite. So mental health issues impact our circadian rhythms, and those are the natural rhythms in the brain that control sleep and appetite. And it can be either for both sleep and appetite, it can be too much or too little, and a mix and match kind of a thing. So people either find that they can't sleep at all. They go to sleep, they have difficulty falling asleep, takes forever to fall asleep. You can't stay asleep. You wake up multiple times during the night. Once you wake up, it's hard to go back to sleep. Or people may find that all they want to do is sleep, that they can sleep 12 hours and still not feel rested. And all they can think about is getting back in the bed. Same thing with appetite. People either lose their appetite and just don't really have any interest in food, or all they do is eat, and it's kind of this mindless eating. And it can be either one. It can be sleeping too much and losing your appetite, or sleeping too little and eating too much, or sleeping too much and eating too much. It can be any combination of those, but mental health issues impact our circadian rhythms. Problems with memory and concentration just kind of impacts our ability to think our way through things, have a sharp memory, recall things, be able to concentrate and focus. That's also a sign. Certainly changes in our mood. And this particularly applies to depression. We can have feelings of hopelessness. We can feel helpless. We can feel sad. We can also feel on edge. We can have a short fuse. We can be irritable. We used to have in our diagnosing manual years ago, when I started my career in the 80s, we had a type of depression that we called irritable depression, because when everybody thinks of depression, they think of sadness. And that's not the only manifestation. In fact, one of the primary manifestations of depression in males is irritability, having a short fuse, being on edge, having outbursts, anger is one of the primary manifestations of depression in men. So we want to take a look at that. And having active suicidal thoughts or passive suicidal thoughts. Certainly the active suicidal thoughts are those feelings that you don't want to live anymore. People often, as a release, think about how they might do that, how they might end this suffering. Or we can have passive suicidal thoughts, which aren't the active, I have a plan, I'm thinking about it, I don't want to live anymore. But it's feelings like, what's the point? Or I'm a burden and everybody would be better off if I weren't here. So certainly that's kind of our red flag, our biggest red flag. If you're having any thoughts or feelings like that, to take action. And we're going to talk about that here as we get to the end. Continuing on with signs that there may be a problem. Very often we lose interest in things. We don't engage again with either our families or our hobbies or our lives. We just withdraw. And I think I'm going to say this later, that isolating ourselves, but withdrawing from activities. The things that we do, if we still participate in things, it just doesn't feel the same. We lose interest in our ability to enjoy either activities, hobbies, or relationships. And our technical term for that is anhedonia. So you all just learned a new word to add to your vocabulary. So anhedonia is the loss of interest and pleasure in things. We can become more sensitive. We have a higher tendency to take things personally. We get offended really easily. We can be really defensive, or we can overreact to things. So things that might have been, small, feel big, and if you find that people in your life are saying things to you like, wow, you took that the wrong way, or, you're so sensitive lately. If our natural tendency would be to be defensive. But particularly if people who know you really well and care about you and love you are saying things like that to you, it may be time to think about taking some action. This next symptom is a little more indicative of anxiety, excessive worry and rumination, just thinking, what about this? What about that? What am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about that? If you're lying awake at night, running through this litany of problems or things that need to be solved, that's something to take a look at, and it's a little more indicative of anxiety. Difficulty making decisions. I think I've decided, but then I question myself. I go around and around with all the options, and I can't, I feel less confident in myself, and I can't really move forward in making a decision. Generally not feeling well, having lots of general aches and pains, feeling really tired all the time, headaches, GI problems. If you're living on Tums and antacids, but the doctor can't find anything, a lot of people end up in my office with a referral from their doctor. They don't feel well, they hurt here, they hurt there, they're having headaches. They've had every conceivable test in the world. They've had, scans and MRIs and upper GIs and lower GIs and, all kinds of tests, and it reveals nothing. A lot of folks end up in my office that way when they just don't feel well physically, but the doctor hasn't been able to identify any particular problem. A lot of folks end up in my office that way, with, just not feeling well. Okay, so let's go through a list of coping strategies that a lot of us turn to when we're trying to manage how we're feeling. If there's been some decline in our mental health, and we're struggling, these are some of the things that we try, or these are some of the ways that we live with our stressful, busy lives. And it's a way to manage ourselves, but they're not really helpful. And I've labeled this what doesn't work. Unfortunately, these things work, but only in the immediate sense, right? And then they often create larger problems. These are the things that we commonly turn to, and are really easy for us to utilize. One of them is ignoring it, hoping it will go away, doing nothing, pretending it's not there, whatever it is, the problem or our own feelings, and just hoping it will go away. That rarely works. It's a delay tactic, but it usually, if we don't do something, usually things get bigger and continue to worsen. Using substances, alcohol, nicotine, other drugs, even legal. I'm not just talking about illegal drugs, but there are other legal drugs out there. Mood altering substances is kind of this whole category here. You know, I tell what I think is a really funny therapist joke. My husband doesn't think it's so funny, but you know, here it is. You know what the problem with alcohol is? It works. Most of these substances act on the frontal cortex, which is this part of the brain right here, the thinking part of our brain. When we're lying awake at night, worrying and thinking, this is the part of the brain that's active. And mood altering substances act on this part of the brain right here, and relatively quickly as well. I see a lot of people who come into my office with anxiety. For years, they've been prescribed benzodiazepines, Xanax, Ativan, Klonopin, those types of things. They're taking 0.5 milligrams 3 times a day, or 1 milligram 3 times a day of some of these things. And I'm wondering how they're even conscious. The problem with most of these mood altering substances is our body gets used to it, and over time, it takes more and more to have the same effect. And then we end up in a not so good space. So we really want to be careful about our use of substances. Frequently, we turn to other types of compulsive behavior: food, gambling, sex, shopping, work, even work. Other types of compulsive behavior. These types of compulsive behaviors produce endorphins in the brain. Those are the pleasure chemicals that we all want more of, and they numb our pain. But also, once again, with those, they take over our lives, and they create larger problems in the long run than the immediate problems that they solve. So before I move on to the next one, if you're at the point where it takes I'm not a Starbucks drinker, so I don't, the biggest grande latte, 5 shots of espresso, and half a pack of cigarettes to get going in the morning, and you're surviving during the day on fast food and Red Bull, and it takes a couple, 2, 3 more, or 5 or 6 stiff drinks in the evening to relax and settle down, we got a problem. We're not in a good space. So if that's kind of what your life looks like, or you're drifting into that, it's time to take a look at what's going on in your life, and think about a commitment to making something different. That behavior is not sustainable, totally in the long run, without negative consequences. So I encourage you, if you find that that's kind of where you are, to, you know, pause for a moment and think about what you might be willing to do to change. Another way that we often try to manage our own feelings is controlling others. We say to ourselves, if only so-and-so wouldn't do that, I would be fine. Or if only my children would behave, I wouldn't have to get so upset. Or if only my spouse were X, Y, or Z, I would be fine. that's a sign that we're not in a good space if we're not able to manage what's happening in our life. Another way is we go the opposite, and instead of trying to control others and make them what we think they should be, is we seek approval. And we think, if only I could please everyone, then everything would be fine. Nobody would be upset with me, and my life would be fine. And so we bend over backwards trying to make sure that everyone else is okay, and we forget about ourselves. Taking things out on others is never helpful. What we're doing there is projecting and, saying that it's their fault. And we're once again trying to manage our own emotions by controlling someone else's behavior. Overreacting never helps, but we find ourselves in that space. And then we feel like we have to justify our overreaction, or we feel guilty. And it just starts this whole cycle of negative emotions. Blaming others, thinking it's everybody but ourselves. If you think the problem, if in your life everyone is a problem, it might be time to take a look at yourself. So, if you think it's your spouse or your partner that's the problem, or your children, or your coworkers, or your boss, or your subordinates, or the person driving the car in front of you, or the person who pulled out or didn't let you in, it's time to take a look and see if there's something I need to be doing. A lot of us have a hard time asking for what we need, and sometimes if we're vocal about it in an appropriate way, if we can identify what we need, it sets the stage for us to be in a better space. When we are not in a good space, we really don't want to be around others. And we isolate ourselves. And that is not a helpful, it's what we want to do because it feels too hard. And we just don't feel like, back to that anhedonia thing and the lack of motivation. We just don't feel like being around other people, and it's not enjoyable, and it's even hard. So we want to isolate ourselves and just be alone in our basement. And that's not helpful. So we want to take a look at that. So we've covered all kinds of things that are very often our first line of how we try to manage what we're experiencing. And like I said, the problem is some of these things work in the immediate sense, but they're not helpful in the long run and even create more problems. So I'm going to assume, Eric, we don't have anything that we don't have any questions we want to.
Yeah, let's take a minute here and just give anybody the opportunity. If you want to raise your hand and ask a question or a comment, make a comment, please do so. I'll unmute you, or you can use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. I believe it's at the bottom. So, yeah, you bring up a lot of great points there, and I think all of us, at least I can speak for myself, that it seems like a lot of those things that you've come up with so far is little bits and pieces of it, or something that we all do on a periodic basis.
I can't tell you that I don't start my day with a cup of coffee, right?
Yeah.
But it's not 5 shots of espresso, right? It's like it's a cup of coffee.
Yeah, it was like when I was in the habit of drinking 2 or 3 Monster Energy drinks a day. Probably not a good habit, right?
That is correct. That's absolutely correct. And so, sometimes I jokingly tell people, like, look at the floorboard of your vehicle or your work truck, right? And if it's filled with, Red Bull and fast food bags and, Coke and whatever else, right? Like it's time to, to go, maybe I need to make some changes.
I've got here, for people who are struggle to balance work and their life, what are some good tips to get over the anxiety that they might be that causes them to stress over work and prevents them from taking time off or just relaxing?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if everybody else, you cut out a little bit there for me, Eric, on that question. So can you repeat it?
For people who struggle to balance work and their life, what are some good tips to get over anxiety and that they might be experiencing that causes them to stress over work, preventing them from taking time off or relaxing.
Yeah. We're going to talk about some of those things when we go to the what works. I think first off, it's a commitment, right? Like we have to decide to make a commitment. It's like, I use lots of, lots of physical metaphors when I'm in the therapy room. So you have like, it's like improving your physical health. If you want to improve your physical health, you have to make an active choice to do something. You can't just sit on the couch eating potato chips, wishing that you were more healthy, right? You have to make a commitment and actually do something. And then you don't just do it once. You don't go out for a run once and then wonder why you're not in shape, right? It's something that we have to do on a regular basis. We have to practice, we have to maintain. If you want to be healthy physically, you have to continue to do the things that keep you physically healthy. So I think that, the very first step is, recognizing I want something different, and, and identifying how do I want it to be different and what can I do to get there?
Awesome. Emily asks if you or someone you know describes having suicidal thoughts. What is the first step to advise this person?
One of the myths in the lay community is that if we talk about suicide, it makes it more likely that people are going to do it. That is not true. So we need to talk about it. We need to address it. If you are, if you are with someone who's expressing that, I would say directly to them, it sounds like you're struggling with some thoughts of suicide. And if they say I am, then it's time to take action. It's time to say, what would you be willing to do? Can we call, there's a national, just like 911 now, everybody knows 911 for emergencies. 988 is a national suicide hotline. You can call there. Every community in the Commonwealth of Virginia is covered by a community services board. Here where I am in Blacksburg, our community services board has a hotline number. You can always take someone to the emergency room. If you really feel like they're at risk for doing it, like if they have said to you, I have a plan, I'm going to do it, you can always call 911. They may be, one of the barriers to us doing that and intervening is our fear that someone's going to be mad at us. And from my perspective, I would say it's better for them to be alive, to be mad at you, than to not be alive. So it's a scary thing, but I think talking about it directly and addressing it directly is the thing to do. Is that it? Any more questions? Any more things in the chat so far?
We're all caught up. I think you can continue.
Okay, good. So we've talked about what doesn't work, which is, our tendency to step into those things. Let's talk a bit of, so what are some things we can do? What are some things that we can do to begin improving our mental health? Or if we have pretty decent mental health, getting to an even better space, or if we're not where we want to be, heading in that direction. Take good care of your physical health. Remember, I said the brain is an organ like any other organ in the body. It is impacted by what we're doing, what we're ingesting, what our blood values are on all of the essential, nutrients and things that we need. So take good care of your physical health, because the brain is an organ like any other organ in the body. Good nutrition and hydration are important. There are some really interesting new studies out about pretty much its mental health exists in the gut, the relationship between our gut health and our mental health. A lot of the psychotropic medications that people take, antidepressants and antidepressants in particular, are metabolized in the gut, not in the stomach. People think they're metabolized in the stomach. It's in the gut. So there's a significant relationship between gut health and mental health. So good nutrition is important. We forget about the importance of hydration. There was an interesting study out where they gave a group of, they took two groups of students and matched them for all of the other factors, intelligence, whatever, all the factors. And they gave them a standardized test. And they gave the first group of students the standardized test. The second group of students They gave them water. They had them drink 12 ounces of water and waited a half an hour and gave them the same test. And the students whose bodies and brains were hydrated performed better on this standardized test in a statistically significant fashion. So we forget about the importance of hydration. Those of you who work outside, most of you, we're entering the summer. It's going to be hot. It's something to really be mindful about. Good sleep hygiene is incredibly important. Sleep is the restorative process in the brain that helps clear out plaques. It helps commit memories into long-term memory. Sleep hygiene is incredibly important. For those of us who have ever had, a couple of sleepless nights, we know how much that impacts our ability to function the next day. So sleep is incredibly important. Try to adopt a healthier lifestyle in general, move more, stay more hydrated, those types of things. There was an interesting study. I put the role of physical activity in here to remind myself to say this. The British Psychological Society just conducted a meta-analysis of multiple studies on effective treatments for depression and anxiety. And they found that physical activity was beneficial in improving symptoms of depression, anxiety, and distress. And in some studies, it was nearly as effective as antidepressant medication and counseling. I still would say, if you're in a space where your symptoms are more severe, impairing your performance, if you're having any thoughts about suicide, either active or passive, I don't think exercise, just saying I'm going to exercise is where we are. We probably need to have some type of medical intervention there. All of our studies about what's effective in treating depression and anxiety point toward the most effective treatment being a combination of medication and counseling or psychotherapy. Get your annual physical, people. We need to know what's going on with metabolites, vitamin D, all the things that the doctor measures as a part of the blood work that they do, cholesterol, but even just some essential nutrients. Everyone's pretty much vitamin D deficient these days. And we're finding out that vitamin D plays a significant role in depression as well, and in general mental health. So get those annual physicals. Let's talk a little bit about the work-life balance. Pretty much the symptoms of burnout are the symptoms of a major depressive disorder. All of those symptoms overlap. And so we want to try to have a good work-life balance. One of those things just requires us initially to begin setting good boundaries around work. That means leave work on time, leave work at work. Now, leave work on time, what does that even mean, right? My schedule seems to be a little more structured, right? I know when I have patients scheduled, I go in then, right? When when you're getting ready for a tournament or trying to get your course ready for something, it's so hard to know, like, what does leave work on time even mean, right? There are always things that can be done. And sometimes we don't make good decisions about whether something absolutely needs to be done today, or if it can wait until tomorrow, or maybe even next week. Sometimes we just get accustomed to staying at work. And we've got to make decisions to leave work on time. That's the physical part of leave work on time. The mental part is leave work at work. If we leave work, but we're still thinking about work, we're still at work and we're working for free. I don't know about you, but I don't like to work for free. And so we have to also leave work at work. If you keep thinking about work, you have to learn to dismiss it. It'll come back. You have to dismiss it again. It'll come back. You have to dismiss it again. And you have to just keep practicing your way into leaving work at work. Be mindful about your work schedule. We just get into the habit of, working 12 and 14-hour days. And we have to begin to change that and make active decisions around that. When you're off work, be off work. Manage your thoughts around work. That goes back to that, leave work at work. I tell people, like, if you have difficulty and you're tempted to check your email, put your computer in a different room. I sometimes keep my computer on the island in the kitchen, and I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh, do I have an email? Oh, and then you get sucked in. You check one email, two emails, and the next thing you know, you've been working for 45 minutes. If I put my computer in my home office and I don't go in there, I don't check it. American workers are notoriously bad about using their vacation days. American workers use only 51% of their vacation days. We leave 49%, almost half of our vacation days on the table. I can't tell you how many people tell me that they're in a use it or lose it situation with leave time and they can't take it because they can't be off work. So they're going to lose work, lose vacation days. I was at a conference one time and overheard a couple of people talking, and one guy was saying that he had like 1,400 hours of leave built up, and he was saying it proudly. And I'm going to say to you, having tons of leave time built up that you don't use is not a badge of honor. It's a recipe for burnout. Take your vacation days. We have to be mindful about setting aside time for relaxation. It is not a luxury, it's a necessity. We need downtime. We need time to recharge physically. We need time to recharge emotionally. We are not robots. We're not machines. We're humans. We need time to recover. It's good to have time where you're doing nothing. It's good to be bored. Boredom is good for the brain, actually. It allows space for other things. To come in there. We need to set aside time for ourselves every day. It might be, quiet time for a cup of coffee in the morning. It might be, quiet time at the end of the day. It might be taking time out just to, sit somewhere quietly. Many of you work on really beautiful courses with really beautiful spaces that other people pay to come to. Like anything, we stop seeing it, right? Take time to set aside for yourself. Like I said, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Strengthen your social support. There are some interesting studies out there that people who socialize with their coworkers are happier. And I'm not saying they have to be your best friends, but it means knowing things about the people that we work with. I had a group of coworkers when I was in community mental health in Mississippi. We had lunch together once a week. And it was awesome to have that social support. And some of us are still friends and keep up with each other. Social support is important to us. We really need to do a better job of managing our electronics. We need to take a break from technology. I encourage everybody to turn off as many alerts on your cell phones as you can. Like, those things stay in our pocket. And when we get alerts for everything, it calls our attention to it, right? Like, we don't need to know every time someone has posted something to Facebook or posted something to Instagram or tweeted something out. We can create space where we look at those things, but we don't need to always have our attention called away. Or when we get an email, we can make a specific time that we check email. Try not to check email after hours. Some of you are old enough like me to remember a time when your work phone sat on a desk and it was plugged into a wall, and that's where it had to stay or it wouldn't work. Mostly everything was fine, right? We came to work the next day and checked our messages. We didn't respond to everything immediately. So this goes back to when you're off work, be off work. Try to manage your electronics more appropriately. Lots of us out there are perfectionists. We allow our perfectionism to control our lives, and we try to control other people's lives with our perfectionism. It can be hard to let go of that, right? But very often our perfectionism is a source of stress for us. I'll tell a story about Mike. I remember when in another phase of our lives, when we had children at home, I had this thing about, I didn't want any dishes in the sink when I went to bed. So sometimes if the dishwasher were full, I felt the need to empty the dishwasher so that I could load the dishes. And sometimes it might've been midnight. And I remember, being annoyed with my husband because he went to bed. And I was thinking to myself, like, how can he go to bed? Well, I now realize who the smarter one was in that situation. So sometimes we have to learn to let go of perfectionism.
Lisa, a
Go ahead.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in our industry, in the turf industry, a lot of the people on the call, the seasonality of this business makes it really difficult to take those vacations traditional to other in-office workplaces. So I think it's really a challenge for our people in industry to take vacations in the summer. Some people have found ways to manage it, but can you speak to that a little bit and
Yeah.
maybe some strategies to kind of get over the hump on doing
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah. One of the things Mike and I suggest when we speak to, particularly, we do a whole seminar together on work-life balance. And we talk about there are seasons in your job that are busier and seasons that are less busy. And you might have to adjust, right? So for me, like the seasonality of my work is that um, I can see fewer patients in the summer. People are more relaxed. Their kids aren't getting in trouble in school. So it's easier for me to take vacation in the summer. For me, the busy time is the holidays, right? So as we're gearing up for Thanksgiving all the way through Christmas, that's when I see people who are really stressed around family things. So if the seasonality is that, this is your busy time, you may not be able to take vacation time. You'll have to take vacation time during a time that it's a downtime, right? So you may go on vacation in December or January or February. I know that's conference season, right? Like both the Sports Field Managers Association and the Golf Course Superintendents Association have their meetings one's in January, one's in February. It's because of that. It's because people can get away at that time in order to attend conference. So that just might have to be your habit. But you have to make it work, right? You may not be able to take a traditional summer vacation, but you might be able to take a midwinter vacation or something like that. So you have to plan around what the nature of your job is. So say no. Some of us aren't good at saying no. It is okay to say no. And if you find you can't say no initially, practice saying, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. And that gives you time. One of my New Year's resolutions, I was kind of an overachiever, I was that person that was, had a full-time job. I had children. I was the PTA president. I was the HOA president. I taught Sunday school. I, was one of those overfunctioners. And 1 year, my New Year's resolution was I was going to say no. Actually, one of the things I had to do 1 year was say, I'm discontinuing everything. And it took a little while, right? Like I was on the board of directors for a United Way agency. That was a 3-year commitment. It took a while for me to I was doing a reset in my life. And my New Year's resolution that year was I was only going to say yes to something if I could say yes fully and unconditionally. If there were anything that I was like, it was a no. So we have to learn to say no. And guess what? It's okay. People survive. We survive. This goes back to the same thing. Like if you want to work on your physical health, you got to do stuff. If you want to work on your mental health, you got to do stuff. Read self-help books, read personal growth stuff. There's tons of it out there. Listen to podcasts, subscribe to an inspirational message of the day, read a daily meditational, do something that puts something positive in, that puts something good in. There's just so much out there that we can have access to. You can find the right thing for you. Make a commitment to do something like that. Sometimes our jobs don't give us the life satisfaction that we would like. And sometimes our families don't either. And so sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. We have to look for meaning and satisfaction in other areas of our lives. It might be a volunteer organization that you're committed to. It might be something on an ongoing basis. It might be a one-time thing. I went to the grocery store this morning and passed the guy that was loading up the day-old bread to pick it up and take it to our local food pantry. That's his thing. That's that guy's thing. And it gives meaning to his life. Like there are things that we can find that do that. For many of us, our spiritual or prayer lives are an important part of the general spiritual support and hope and wisdom that we find in that. So if that's a thing for you, you can turn to that. I'm watching the time. Enlightened self-interest is not selfishness. Very often when we look at self-care, when we, try to do things for ourselves, people sometimes have a hard time because they feel like it's selfish. There's this thing called enlightened self-interest. And here's my example. So when we fly on an airplane, we all listen to the flight attendants tell us that in the event of depressurization, the masks will drop. And they tell you to put your own mask on first before putting someone else's on. And we all, for most of us, our first inclination, like if our loved one or our child is sitting next to us, is we want to help them first, right? There are two reasons to put our own mask on first. One, if we pass out, we cannot help the person next to us, whether it's someone we know and love and care about, or whether it's a stranger. We cannot help anybody else if we have passed out. The second reason is if we pass out, not only can we not help them, but we become a burden to others. So there's some really significant reasons to take care of yourself first. And it's so that you can be a good coworker, partner, spouse, parent, community member. And it's also so that you're not a drain on those people as well. We have to be willing to ask for help. It can be a difficult thing, but there are people out there who are resources for us. We need to make a plan and act on it. We can't just, I'll go back one. We need to make a plan and act on it. We can't just hope for better mental health or wish for better mental health. Just like if we want to improve our physical health, we have to do something to improve our mental health. Okay, so this is an opportunity now. If any of you have any, we have a few minutes. If any of you have any suggestions that you have that have worked for you, or that you say like, this is a thing that really helped me, or I learned this from somebody else. Now is the time if you want to unmute or type it into the chat. Many of you have some really good ways that you have found that work for you, and it's an opportunity for you to share that with the other folks who are on here.
Yeah, if you want to use the chat function or raise hand, I can unmute you.
I see a chat.
That's a good one. It says,
Yeah, somebody said, pick people that make me feel good, safe, and laugh. It's true. We need to surround ourselves with happy, positive people, right? I think that's an awesome suggestion. And you can also try to be that positive, happy person yourself.
yeah. Laughter is huge. Listen to some comedy if possible.
I told my husband one day, I said to him, if I'm ever in the hospital long term, I want you to just put the TV on America's Funniest Home Videos and just leave it there. Because laughter is healing. It's true.
He says, for this industry, one thing that I've learned is that you have to set up procedures in your own company and empower employees to make decisions. You can take time off when you need to. If you want vacation on a beach in the summer, for example, and for your business part not to fall apart. Great point.
So it is a great point. One of the things Mike and I talk about when we do the work-life balance one is about delegating, like in order to step away or, be gone, you need to have people that you can delegate to, and you need to empower those people. It helps them, it helps you. We work better together as a team. And it's so true. We have to learn to delegate. We have, obviously, appropriate training is important there, but being able to delegate to people empowers everybody. It's a great point.
Any other comments? I guess, and feel free to tip or raise your hand if you do come up with one. But as we wrap up here, Lisa, great job. It's a great topic. I could see why it would take 4 hours to cover these topics, because it's just so in depth and people start sharing their stories and I think it's nice to hear that other people are sharing the same type of issues, right? We're not in this by ourselves.
We are not alone. Like I said, 20% of the population, and that's just reported. That does not account for people who have not sought care.
Yeah. So on the screen now, for all you guys and gals that have been following our Learn webinars, this is the next one. This will be the last one for our spring season. Dr. Fleetwood from Precision Labs is going to get on in June 8th and talk about wetting agent and adjuvant use and strategies. This is the QR code that will take you to that registration. So, feel free to use that. As a reminder, this session will be recorded and sent to everybody that was registered for this event. And then my last comment is, after the June 8th webinar. GCSAA has approved 0.4 credits CEUs for our spring session. So I will send links to all 4 sessions of the recordings, as well as the GCSAA points, so that you can get your certification points to build your library there. So I got a lot of thank yous coming in. Scott Malden, thanks for joining us. Thanks for the meeting. It was and information today. It was great. Have a great weekend. So thank you. You do the same, Scott. Dee, thank you for your participation today, and everyone. Have a great weekend. Do some self-evaluations and let's try to be better tomorrow than we were today. So
Awesome.
thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.